There's a great moment in the opening of the baseball film where Gerald Early, one of our great essayists and writers right now, says there's only three things America is going to be known for.
The Constitution, jazz music, and baseball. They're the three most beautifully designed things this culture has ever produced.
And you sort of laugh and go, yeah, those are three great American things, and you sort of go on. But then I defy you to try to find others that are equal to that in their true, utter inner significance. And think about them. 4 pieces of parchment paper written at the end of the 18th century, able to adjudicate the most complicated and thorny problems of the late 20th century. You got a simple children's stick and ball game that has infinite ballet-like combinations. And you've got this music, the only art form ever invented by Americans, at whose heart is improvisation. That is the American genius. We do things on the fly. Thomas Jefferson said the pursuit of happiness. He didn't say happiness, he said the pursuit of it. It meant we were always in the process of becoming. That's our genius as a people. To me, I think that the reason why these are the valuable milestones in human existence is because there's some larger emotional component to them. They aren't just the sum of their parts. And this other emotional part is what we're after. Why not have a history that's like that? Why not have a visual history that's like that? Why not be able to hear the words as well as read them? Why not be able to see the mincing steps that Babe Ruth took as he rounded the base? These tiny legs on top of this barrel-chested body. Why not look into Jackie Robinson's face and see what he had to experience? Why not talk about what he had to do than just read the statistics on his plaque in the Hall of Fame? This is a different kind of history, but I think it's one that goes beneath the skin and gets into people, and that's the only one for me.
Describe for us, if you will, what that alchemy is that you use.
Well, you know, there's not a primer, and you know, I've got lots of secrets that I'm willing to share. I mean, how you shoot archives, where you just don't hold them at arm's length. You sort of go in and you listen to the old photograph. What's the sound of the cannon? Are there birds chirping? Do the leaves in the trees of that photograph taken in 1863 have a sound? Do they rustle? What's the dust sound like? And that's the way I look, and I do it. You know, I simply look through my camera and shoot and find the close-up and the new stories. My work is not just interested in the dry dates and facts and events of the past, but in the emotional archaeology. And I've called myself an emotional archaeologist because we know that that's the glue that makes these complex past events stick in our minds and in our hearts and permanently a part of who we are now. The big mistake is that history is back then, the past is gone. History is right now. History is, not was, William Faulkner said. And what he's saying is that we're never going to change what happened on the 3rd day at Gettysburg when Pickett launched his ill-fated charge. But the way we engage our questions now about it tell us who we are right now, and that's a great thing.
You're very passionate about this, aren't you?
Well, I don't know what it is. Harry Truman said the only thing that's really new is the history you don't know. And you just sort of slough it off. I mean, for most people, history is just another subject in the curriculum, and you forget that it is the pageant of everything that has gone before this moment. This moment. Everything before that is history. And that changes it a bit.
Your pieces can run long. They take their time. This is the age of fast cuts. How do you do that?
Well, you know,
We're not trained for that.
No, we're not, and I get into a lot of problems, and sometimes you get critics who, you can just tell, have sat down with 18 and a half hours of baseball and are pissed off, you know?
18 and a half hours?
I'm going to write the same length column for 18 and a half hours as I am for the situation comedy that's a half an hour, including minus the ad breaks. But you know, we realize, I think, in the end, that all meaning accrues in duration. The things that we are all proudest of, the work we've done, the relationships we have, occur in duration. It's the thing that we've given our best attention to. And we realize in the end, the only thing we have is our attention. So I'm looking to try to create something that reminds people of that. We know that the human eye, the human body, physiologically can receive an image and read it in a fraction of a second. MTV tells us that all the time. But what does that mean? What does it mean? Does it have meaning at all? And I'm suggesting that it doesn't. That sometimes if you say, look at this, no, don't cut. Look, hold, that meaning accrues in some sort of duration.
You have stated that your mother's death had a profound effect on you. What was that effect, if you could share that?
My mother had cancer. I mean, it's a story that's replayed in millions and millions of American families. There wasn't a moment when I wasn't aware as a child that my mother was sick and possibly dying. So that if you can understand a childhood that is colored by that overhanging imminent tragedy. So from 3 on till 11, almost 12 when she died, this was the operating vibe of my family. And a sociologist was interviewing me recently for a book about people who had lost their parents as children. And at the end of it, she asked me this question, and it surprised me, my answer. She said, what is your mother's greatest gift to you? And I instantaneously said, dying, and started to cry. And I realized that that was the truth. That it was, for the first time, almost 35 years after she had died, I had come to the very painful but obvious fact that having died made me who I am, in not just bad ways, as one would say, but in good ways too. So in some ways, amidst all the tragedy, and I don't mean to say I'm glad she died, obviously, that event was a gift, a kind of challenge to have a life that would now be inexorably changed by disease and then death, but one, nevertheless, from which certain possibilities would then exist. And how would I take those possibilities and make something of it?
Were you able to express your emotions? Was it an emotional home life?
I think yes and no. I certainly find that there is some extraordinarily therapeutic release in the emotionalism of my films. I love the cathartic cleansing that dealing with sadness is. I remember that I used to weep every time we got to our 9th episode of Baseball in the editing room, even when it was unformed and pretty bad, at Jackie Robinson's funeral. And I realized finally after a while, I missed him. I missed him, and a man I never knew. I had gotten to know him. It's just like Lincoln. There was a moment, the most powerful moment of working on the Civil War. It wasn't done. It was in the mix of the last episode of the film. And we were doing the assassination scene at Ford's Theater, and we had a very complicated and layered, textured sound effects track, 25 separate tracks that now had to be melded into one in a very complicated and expensive process for us. And it had been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and finally we were in this last episode, and it was almost Christmas. We were supposed to be done weeks before, and we laid in the tinny sound of the play that was going on, Our American Cousin.
Oh, you always seem sure of hitting your mark.
The audience laughter that we added in. We had our own music going on. We had the narrator describing the inexorable movement towards the presidential box.
Booth swallowed 2 brandies at a nearby bar, then returned to the theater. He waited for the laughter to rise, then slipped silently into the president's box.
Augusta, dear.
He held a dagger in his left hand, a Derringer pistol in his right.
A nasty beast. Sir, your vulgarity renders you intolerable in polite society.
And the footfalls. The door slams. We laid everything down. Now it was time to go back and add the gunshots. So the mixer went back, and we're moving towards it. And I remember one of my coworkers looked at me, and her eyes were bright, and I suddenly just realized what was going on. I yelled, "Stop!" And the mixer hit the button, and this thing just slowed down, boom, 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 just to the moment before the gunshots came. And with $500 or $600 or $700 an hour going through the meter, we just looked at each other. We just stopped. And for a moment, with tears streaming down our faces in recognition of all the effort over 5.5 years we'd put out, but also for the power we had as filmmakers, we kept Abraham Lincoln alive. And we just looked at each other, and then everybody looked at me, and I nodded. He backed up. We killed Lincoln. And then finished the film and went home for Christmas. And I will never forget the power of that moment when, for just a brief second, we all kept him alive, you know, and that's why I'm doing this job.